There are three people here. I am Jeremy Sherman. That makes four of us, I think. And we can talk about anything. I'll wait, let's see, another minute before I start with anything. Hello, by the way, and thank you. Oh, wow, there's five of us now. Thank you for being here. I love having these conversations, and in just a second, I'll actually start conversations with myself. I've been alone a lot lately. I had very few jazz gigs. Been walking less out with my research buddy Terrence Deacon. I've been home writing. I do fine with time like that, but it's also just great to get to connect. And now that it is 11 o'clock, I'll also say that these YouTube live events inspired me to set up this study group. If you've seen it in my videos to the end, you'll see that there's an invitation there to send me your email address, and we start to have meetings. This is the Advanced Psychoproctology for Beginners study group, but it'll cover whatever. But this is a group. I've now got about 60 people who signed up for it, and 30 showed up to our first meeting, which was last Sunday. At this time, at 9 o'clock in the morning, California time, had a grand old time working on what I described as the issue we could talk about here, which is coming up with better ways to deal with absolutists or people who get absolutist about something. That is, these are not people you can necessarily walk away from. They're dangerous. They're not necessarily people you can get connected to by asking questions. A popular approach called street epistemology. I'm suggesting, that's a great technique, but there are some people for whom that doesn't work. So that's what that study group is about, and it's really a practicum. I got this idea from one of the participants. We happened to talk before the session. We had I do that half-hour free conversation, and as we talked, I realized that she had a great idea, which was we need to actually use it as a practicum. You could say we would bring in examples of dealing with someone who is absolutist about something, and we would kind of critique techniques for dealing with them. We'd also do role play. So this would be, for example, role playing with a Trumpist. I was actually hoping that we'd get some real Trumpists in there so we could role play with them. But short of that, any of us could probably do an imitation of them, and really just trying to work out better ways of dealing with them. So that was in part inspired by these live conversations because, by the YouTube live, because here I am talking at you. I haven't got any comments yet or questions or challenges or any of that stuff. I invite all of that. But it was just fabulous to get together with 30 people from all over the country, all sorts of professions and backgrounds. We had a hostage negotiator. We had actually, he didn't join this time. His wife did. She's a luxury product marketing expert, among other things. We had a PhD criminologist. We had a hypnotherapist, a Brazilian hypnotherapist from Oklahoma. Just the range is fabulous. Ex-military, blue collar, every variation. And it was just such fun to jam like that. So I am going to put it down in the chat in case you haven't already seen it as ad nauseum. Here's my email address. If you want to be on the mailing list for what goes on with the study group, we're going to be meeting again next Sunday at 9 o'clock. They want to do it every 2 weeks. Just get in touch, and we'll have you. I'll have you on the list, and you'll get an email. It's super simple to join, and obviously it's free. Hello, Kim Roberts Herring. Nice to hear from you. And I was there at the meeting. It was very cool. I'm glad to hear. And by the way, the meeting was great, and we didn't get enough voices talking. I was concerned about having 30 people all together, all with strong potential opinions. and yet we ended up, I'll just make sure next time to be more inclusive, to make sure that, for example, if someone has talked several times, that someone else gets priority to talk, that kind of thing. Okay, let's see. First Tim or Dale, okay. Oh, first timer. Yes, hello, Dale. Nice to meet you. Yes, well, good. Okay, so I am soaking up information. Good. Well, so this week has been interesting for me. So when I first put out this advanced psychoproctology for beginner, the first session, I got a huge response. This was shortly after the election, like 20, huge by my standards. Not if I was selling more palatable and mind candy, but there was something like 25,000 people who responded. By the time I got to episode 7, I had something like 600 views. And I don't know what that is, and I don't want to care that much about it. That is, my goal in this work is to be as careful and honest as I can be in describing what's going on and giving my perspective, knowing that honesty is not truth. That is, I'm not speaking truth. That's an arrogant thing to claim. Lots of people honestly believe untrue things, and I can think of no reason why I'd be an exception to that. But I do try to be as honest as possible, and I'm not, while I am obsessed with how to frame things to get maximum brain and heart Velcro with my audience, I don't want to be distracted by what's selling and what's not selling. So it's a delight. I get a little uptick in joy and self-affirmation when a video of mine takes off, but I don't want to get addicted to it. I don't want the letdown. I don't want the distraction of feeling like, oh, no one's paying attention. I have, yeah, this is a loosish connection. I was good buddies for maybe 5 years with the 2020 Nobel Prize winner in literature. And it was amazing. She was my next door neighbor. We got together for dinner once a week. We had a grand old time. We had almost nothing in common. She was 80 years old. She died last year. And she had won every possible award. I mean, like National Book Award, Pulitzer, Poetry Awards, Nobel Prize, just like, I've never won any awards. But we did have this in common. She did not want to be distracted by audience. She needed some audience. It would have been hard for her to write poetry without it. But she also found that audience could be a distraction from the work. And I have that in common. She had that in common. I have that in common with her. I don't want to be distracted by audience and how to win popularity, how to be how to persuade minds that you're the charismatic one who they should be paying attention to. I'm very wary of the public intellectuals. They often or typically end up being dicks. I think of Joe Rogan. I think of Jordan Peterson this way. There's a lot of them that the more audience they get, the more confident they get. The more confident they get, the less they're thinking, and pretty soon they're just following whatever audiences will sell. So I'm like that. And then again, I have great training in that from a guy, this Harvard Berkeley neuroscientist I've worked with for 30 years. He was offered big positions, and she was never interested. He was never interested. He just wanted to get as careful and thoughtful as possible. He turned down invitations, offers of millions of dollars from Jeffrey Epstein, which was a good thing to do. He turned down an offer last week to become a chief scientist in RFK's department. I mean, no, he's just not interested in that stuff. Big book deals he wanted to study. He's not. I can't remember a time in 30 years working closely with this guy where he tooted his own horn. He's very different that way. Anyway, so okay. And what I found myself doing yesterday, I started to write an article based on the work that I've been doing with Terry on the origins of life, and realized that actually that's another series I'm going to do. So yesterday I spent drafting that. Now I don't know if these series are a good idea. I've done several of them now, or at least one I completed. That was that early one about how to roll trolls and stump Trumpists. The second one was irony is your superpower. I haven't completed that yet. Then there was this one, advanced psychoproctology for beginners. They're kind of like mini courses, and I don't know if that format works for folks. Okay, what do we all have in common? Can we agree on that? What actions increase them, like inclusivity? There's a question from Dale. It's the first question I've seen here. If you could maybe, if you could put maybe 3 asterisks before a question so I can see what it is. What do we all have in common? Can we agree on that? This so I would ask a follow-up question to Dale, because of the way my mind is split right now. This new series is on what the fuck we really are, we human beings. It's based from the origins of life to what we are now. And so in that perspective, from that perspective, I look at Dale's question and I think, yeah, that's the question that I'm now trying to focus on. And I have speculations. But at the same time, we're also talking about what do we all have in common in the political realm? Can we agree on that? What actions increase them? It sounds more like Dale might be looking more for something in the political realm, not the biopsychosocial, origins of life realm. So we are what we do. That's a fair statement. But then that doesn't quite answer it, because you've got we in there twice. I mean, see, I guess I would ask you this question first, Dale. Are you talking about in the political realm, what can we do to, create some solidarity against the Trumpists onslaught, or are you suggesting something more like what is the true nature of being a living being, and or are you asking something more like what we need right now is to overcome our divisiveness by getting by overlooking, overcoming our differences and finding what we have in common? I see those as 3 related questions, but I'd like to know where you're coming from on that question. So I know, are you talking about the biopsychosocial? Are you talking about the political? Or are you talking more like how can we come together in greater harmony? That's my question back to you, Dale, and I'd be happy. I encourage you to let me know where you're focused there. Yeah, it's about the study, not the ego boost. Yeah, and here's the challenge for me, Kim, on that. I'm trying to study what we really are. And as you've seen, if you've watched any of my recent videos, I'm really paying a lot of attention to our need for ego boosts. I'm really interested in affirmationomics, the supply of and demand for affirmation. I think that it's the elephant in the room, and I think that we tend not to talk about it. We need to not feel needy, and yet in a way we all are, to some degree or another. And what do I mean by that? It's not just a question of temperament, it's a question of supply and demand. For example, I get enough affirmation that, and I'm older, so I've also given up on a fair amount of affirmation. That is because I never got it, or it didn't happen, or I am what I am, whatever, that sort of thing. And my favorite place to be is kind of over the question of what, how good am I? I spent years dogged by the question, am I good, am I bad? That kind of stuff. And it's been a relief to get over it. But I don't think that this is some kind of act of will on my part. I think that I'm well supplied. I think that I get to be fairly bold and brave out in the world, because not because I'm brave, but because I'm safe. I'm comfortable. I'd have a whole lot of trouble being as ballsy as I am, or whatever you want to call it, if I was living a different life. I'm a creature of circumstances. I have a nice bass voice. I can come across as with some gravitas, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I get my affirmation, and I would miss it if I lost it. but there are other people who need more of it for any number of reasons. And so anyway, like that. Okay, so Dale did come back to politics is social. Yes, come together, explore strategies that encourage community. Okay, so I have a comment about that I think is, it might strike you as odd, or frustrating or disappointing. Um, I have a good buddy who I take a walk with once a week, Joan Blades. She and her husband founded Move On, which was a political organization for a long time. And Joan moved on to a group that was all about what is called, it's one of the groups in what's called the bridging movement, how to encourage community. And what it does is, her group is called Living Room Conversations, and they bring together left-wingers and right-wingers to talk through their values, that sort of thing. To undermine any group is be divisive. Okay, yeah. So Dale, I'm going to challenge your approach here. So the idea here is to build greater community. You'd go in a direct line. You beeline. If you want to reduce war, just try to be more peaceful and expect and hope that everybody will follow suit. And that's kind of Joan Blades' approach to this stuff, which is, if you show people, if you let down your, if you become more tolerant and let down your exclusivity or your divisiveness, then other people will follow suit. They will join you in that. If you give an inch, they'll give an inch, and pretty soon you'll have community. And I believe that sometimes works. But I do not believe that works here. I do not believe that will work with the Trumpists. In fact, I don't think that anything we intuitively try works with Trumpists. They have antibodies for all of it. That's what I meant at the beginning of this by that study group being about dealing with the incredibly tough cases that are out to make it so no matter what you do, they win and you lose. That's what I think is going on with them. I mean, I think it's very much like an exhibitionist. They'll sidle up to you as if for conversation, and then when they've got your attention, they open their trench coats and show off their stiff little triumphalism. And no matter how you respond, they have a way of doubling down on their triumphalism. That's the challenge. Now, so there are a lot of people who say we have to figure out how to cool things down, how to create greater peace. We have to be less divisive. Divisive is a bad word. And I'm reminding them at this point, imagine, you don't have to decide whether Trump is Hitler or Stalin or anything like that. But imagine that you're dealing with someone who is on the verge of going that way. Now, Hitler had his Nazi sympathizers, but I think he also had his Nazi empathizers. People who said, we shouldn't be so divisive. We have to see things from their perspective. We have to learn to get along with each other. We shouldn't do this us and them thing. It's wrong. Now, if that was a bad strategy then, what I want to argue is that it's possible that it's a bad strategy. So to Dale's point, I bring a paradox, which is I want to oust all divisive groups. I hate, which proves I don't hate. And so what we've been working with in that study group, and in general in what I'm offering, what I'm recommending is an interesting combination of carrots and sticks. I posed it as a paradox a while ago, which is there are two kinds of people: the ones who do and don't recognize that we're all the same, and I'm both. That is, I do recognize we're all the same, and I also recognize that we're not all the same. In particular, I'm focused on absolutists who are doing their best to act like they are not the same, that they're superhuman. Okay, so I'm paying attention to them, and what I do with them in practice is I'm both extremely loving and extremely harsh. I call it carrot sticking. It's a combination of carrots and sticks. I will savage them, and at the same time remain very cheerful, very loving, very vulnerable. one of the techniques I have found useful is what I'm calling reverse projecting, which is when I say, dude, I totally get it. I understand where you're coming from. I have gotten defensive too, just like you are. I could tell you wonderful stories of how I got defensive and what it did, how it worked out. Notice what I did there. I projected in reverse. I didn't say you're being defensive, like I'm going to debate that with them, because obviously they'd say, no, I'm not. No, they're not. And so what I'm doing is I'm poking them while deflating myself, because I think one of the biggest problems, even out to the kumbaya kind of approach that we hear, is a kind of grandstanding in competition with their grandstanding. I think this has really slowed down the anti-Trump movement, is the sense that what this is they're pretending they're up on their high house and we're trying to tear them down, but subtly we're trying to put ourselves on the high horse against them. And I'm saying it doesn't work. It's not effective. And okay. All right. So there we go. So I am not quite on the same page as you, Dale, on this thing. I do have a video that I put out a while ago about the 3 iffy ways to deal with conflict. And one of them is certainly yours. So basically I see them as accommodate, that is overcome the divisiveness. Another is assert, which is escalate the divisiveness. And the third is take psychic space. And I use all 3 of them. I do not see one as the answer. The overcoming divisiveness is what gives you Nazi empathizers, and I don't want to be one. I think it's bad for me. I think it's bad for the world. I know it feels good to feel like you're one of the ones who are calling for unity. No, I don't actually want unity with villains. And I think that we're incredibly behind the ball on dealing with the degree of villainy that they're about to get away with. Okay, so Jay wrote, do you find analogies a good way to make people realize how modern politics is just class warfare and not rooting for their favorite team? In my experience, it helps. Thank you, Jay. So there's 2. So yes, I find analogies a good way to make people realize a variety of things. Analogies are kind of central to, how do I put this? The parallels and contrasts fascinate me everywhere. That is, there's a place where metaphors break down. If I said it's always darkest before the dawn, as a way of saying that it's always bad before it's good, I like to remember, no, actually, it's also darkest before death. And there's nothing quite as reliable in our lives as the sun, our rotation around the sun. So darkest before dawn doesn't actually, it breaks down. Now, you're talking about a good way of making people realize that modern politics is just class warfare. I'm very careful about the word just. Just means ignore all other possibilities. I think it's a clusterfuck of things going on, but I do see class warfare as a big one. And here's a challenge I pose to you, Jay, on it, a new challenge. You can shame someone for engaging in class warfare, the rich for engaging in class warfare sometimes. I was born rich, and I was actually quite ashamed of class warfare. Like uncharacteristically, like obsessed with how I was lucky and others were not. It was weird how much of it was a product of many things, including the counterculture that I grew up in. This idea of equality and we're all one. I took it very seriously. I joined the world's largest hippie commune, which was run like communism. Nobody had their own possessions. I took a vow of poverty and gave up my resources to join this thing at 20. I had a few afterwards, which keep me in beans. But in the meantime, there's this other challenge. The rich are proud of class warfare. That is, by now, it's a badge of honor. So is hypocrisy. You could use all sorts of metaphors to try to shame them out of their hypocrisy. We do not understand what's going on with them. What's going on with them is they're proud of their hypocrisy. Rich, powerful people can get away with hypocrisy. We talk about fuck you money in the United States. Fuck you money is the money by which you say, I don't care what you think. Fuck off. I've got money. So there's a way in which it has become a badge of honor. It's a status symbol. It's a kind of bling that you can get away with being hypocrisy. In my experience, you say in your experience it helps. I believe it. I don't know much about your experience, but all I'm trying to do here, I'm not landing on formulas. I can't. Because, if there's one thing I've learned from evolutionary biology, you come up with a good formula and then there's some counter formula and then undermines your formula. I'm trying to explore what's a better bet for now in our current situations here and there, that sort of thing. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I will, here, Dale, Dale asks us a good follow-up question. I will not listen to being savage. Will you? Yes. Yes and no. Here's how that works for me. So in psychology, we talk about the backfire effect, which is I will not listen to being savaged. If someone criticizes you, it stings. And so they're trying to get you to swallow some criticism, and you spit it out because it's bitter. Okay. In my experience, I have been savaged. I spit it out, but some got in anyway. I spit it out, but there was still a lingering thing. So I will not be savage, but nonetheless, I heard a little bit of what they were savaging me about, and I learned from it. So the backfire effect is in psychology is that if you criticize someone, they will dig in their heels. And my response to that is, yeah, at first, but some people end up responding to it. And in the meantime, you know who won't be savage? It's the Trumpists. That is, the quantity of high horse, mind your manners that I've gotten from Trumpists is just amazing. Like they represent some source of high politeness to me is just a hoot. So no, I'll double down when I'm savaging them. And what am I trying to do there? From my perspective, a Trumpist, it doesn't matter what they believe in. It's not that they believe in Trump. It's a lifestyle brand. It's just another one. It could have been hippies, could have been Buddhists. It doesn't matter. What it is when an absolutist goes absolutist, they're not an emperor who's the emperor with no clothes. They're clothes with no emperor. That is, they disappear into a suit of armor. And my goal with them is actually to disappoint them. And by that, I mean, I want to rattle their suit of armor and poke through any chinks in it to see if I can tease out some curiosity. Doesn't have to be curiosity about what I'm saying. I'm not trying to persuade them of my perspective. And instead, what I'm saying is I'm trying to see if I can find in these guys who have become completely secure in their incuriosity, whether I can find anything in them that could be curious about anything. I mean, one question I'll ask in more conversational forms is, can you name some question that you're still on the fence about? You don't really know. And the one question I'm not looking for here is how to get more people to believe that I've solved reality. No, I'm asking about, is there any question? Are you curious about anything? If you're talking to someone who's just grandstanding about how they figured it all out and all that, yeah. So sticks and stones hurt, and so does name calling. Global solidarity. So I'm trying to use a combination of carrots and sticks. So Dale, you may not find satisfaction in this group. This group is actually dealing with, yes, totally. He says, sounds like manipulation. Yeah, here's the thing, Dale, for me, not for you. Doesn't have to be for you. We've got words like manipulation or savage or us and them or divisive. If just stick with me for a second and decide what you think of this. We know they're hella bad. We can just tell. They smell bad. Manipulation. If someone accused me of being a manipulator, I wouldn't take that as a compliment. So they're loaded. And also, they're load-bearing, that you can identify with them, positive or negative. So you say, I'm inclusive. I'm not divisive. So you can the word itself, because it's loaded, can be load bearing. Okay, so I'm not divisive. I'm inclusive. I'm not manipulative. I'm whatever. And so we can do that with these words. They're incredibly ill-defined. They're incredibly ill-defined. What do you mean by divisive? I mean, so getting clear on what these words mean. So for example, if I said that I'm loving, okay, loving sounds hella good. I get to say I'm loving, which means that the term, I rest myself on the pillar of being loving. What is loving? We don't get around to defining it. The people who say it most are the least interested in defining it, because if you defined it, maybe you'd find out that you're not loving. So to me, one of the biggest problems in dealing with these divisive Trumpists is they will use words on us like, it sounds like you're being manipulative. And then we'll get all defensive, like, oh no, that's bad. I'm not divisive. No, I don't want to do that, because they're not paying any attention to what the word means. They're not. That's not interesting to them. It would only be disturbing if they actually looked at what divisive meant, and then have to realize that. So don't get defensive, as Michael points out right here. You don't want to get defensive. I don't take moral counsel from them, which is why I don't mind being savaged by them. They can savage me all they want. They can wallpaper the entire room with what a vile, stupid, weak person I am. And I know that I know to take it in from some people. I keep my own counsel on whose counsel to keep. I don't try to explain myself to them or justify it. They haven't got a moral leg to stand on with me. It sounds like moralizing. So yeah, I'm willing to stick with my focus, which is, in general, you guys will say or do anything to pretend you are eternally triumphant. And what am I doing there? I'm actually using what traditionally, and I think, is called tar babying. Tar babying is I am accusing them of something that no matter how they respond, it sticks to them more. Tar babying, like if I said, you're being defensive, they'd say, no, I'm not, which proves my point. So when I say you will say and do anything to pretend you're always right, righteous, and mighty, you're masturbating in public, they can, chances are, because they're one-trick ponies, it's really all they're doing. I am diagnosing them accurately. They will come back with something that I get to say, there he goes again. It's all he does. And my goal there is to disappoint them. Now, I make a point of not tar babying decent folks. I wouldn't, catch me if you ever hear me saying, you're being defensive, like I'm the authority and I get to decide, or you're being manipulative. If I'm saying something controversial like that to a decent person, a non-asshole, a non-absolutist, then I have to caveat it. I have to say, I feel, or I sense, or in my opinion, you're getting defensive. I do not get to talk like I'm the authority of them. But when I'm dealing with an absolutist, my version of the golden rule is whatever you do unto others is fair game for them to do unto you. These guys will psychologize the shit out of me with all of their savaging. So I don't feel the need to tell them, I believe, or I bet that you'll say or do anything to pretend you're always right. I have to remember that it's my bet, that it's my bet, but I do not have to divulge that to them. I can say, there you go again. You're doing it. Wait, now I hate you. Wait, I don't know who, I was going to say run. I don't know what's going on with run here. He said something up here. I hate them. It's that simple. Fine. I guess one thing I would say about that is, good for you to admit that you hate. This will come back around to that thing about love, the word love. So I saw a meme yesterday from someone maybe in the Senate who said the something like the most I'm trying to remember the actual word. I should have kept the thing. It was fascinating. The most frustrating thing about you guys, or the most disgusting thing about you guys, is me having to admit how much I am capable of feeling disgust. It was something like that, and that is, I had to write back to it and say, no. If that's the most disgusting thing you feel about Trumpists, um, is that you discover that you are disgustable. You don't get it. You don't get it at all. That's not what's most disgusting about it. It's most disgusting about our attitudes, like somehow disgust is beneath us. That's not who we are. So I keep on coming back to this. So I said that love is ill-defined. It's a loaded, load-bearing, loosely defined term, what I call last word. Well, think about what love really means. Love is a strong preference. The more you love something, preferences are always relative. The more you love one thing, the less you love other things, all the way down to hating them. So if you love your children, you'd hate to have something happen to them. If you love equality, you're disgusted, or the negatives and positives. There are people who want to skim and pretend that they can live only with positive feelings. And it's horseshit. If you have positive feelings about something, you will have negative feelings about the opposite, because positivity and negativity go hand in hand. And so the idea that you could be disappointed to discover that you are manipulative or unloving or any of that, get over it. Be real. There you go again. Is dismissive. Yes, it is dismissive. And closing off further conversation. No, Dale, like I say, I may not be your cup of tea. That's totally fine. But you just use dismissive again, like it's something you should never be. Here, try this one out, another loaded term. If I called you a quitter, okay, quitter sounds hella bad, okay? Therefore, it implies that there's a rule that you should never do it. You should never quit. So if you neutralize that term, what does quitter mean? It means to leave something you were formerly in. Okay, is there a rule that you should never do that? No, obviously not. You should leave some things. I quit smoking. Yeah, me. Yeah, you. Okay, so yeah, in different contexts, quit sounds good. But if I called you a quitter in the situation, let's say you and I were in on this conversation, and suppose that just hypothetically decided you're not for me, Jeremy, and I said, "Oh, well, so you're a quitter." It's ridiculous, right? I want to point out that word love. I'll just connect it all back around, because I just think that there's a smarmy dharma out there, a smarma, a belief that we should be kind, loving, generous, compassionate, empathic. We should live by the golden rule. I have tried to understand what all those words mean, and I cannot help but declare that they all mean accommodate. So if to be loving or kind or generous or nice or any of those words mean to accommodate, and it makes it sound like they're good, it's always good to be accommodating, I don't buy it. I don't think any of us really do. We grandstand like we talk like that, but I have never met anybody who's just open to everything always and is willing to accommodate anyone. I don't think we can. I don't think we will. I don't think we should. So the question, to me, love is a question. What to love, what to accommodate, what to not accommodate, when to be dismissive. So if that is not something that one embraces, I encourage one to dismiss me, because that's where I live. And after years of trying other approaches, I'm comfortable with my approach, which is to say love is the question. And one way that I frame it up is hard left, hard right, hard center, hard choices. Hard left is love is the answer. And then you get badly burnt when you love the wrong thing. And so you go hard right, which is toughness is the answer. It's just an illustration. And then you get badly burned being tough to the wrong thing. And then you say, well, tough love is the answer. That's hard center. That is, You find that do both. And then hard choices is no. Tough love is a question. Where to be tough, where to be loving. That's where I want to live. I figure lifelong I'll be dealing with that question. And every day I have a little anxiety about whether I was too loving or too tough in this situation or that. And I figure that comes with the territory. That's exactly what I want. I want the equanimity of being equally anxious that I was too tough or too loving for a circumstance in particular. So that's where I'm at about it. And I want to be perfectly clear on that so that people can figure out whether they want to be dismissive of me or what. That's what I'm trying to manipulate people into considering, if you want to use that. I'll often end up using those negative words positively and positive words negatively. That's part of the whole ironic approach, which is, for example, for me to say, yes, I'm trying to manipulate. I'm trying to manipulate you, or I mean, you do this, for example, with the serenity prayer, which I think is just a fascinating framing. I'm an atheist, but I think the prayer is the quest. We're trying to figure out where to be tough and where to be loving, where to be serene, where to be courageous, all that sort of stuff. So, but if you look at those words that they use in the serenity prayer, serene and courageous sound positive. Okay, well, you could just easily swap them out. Grant me the spinelessness to accept what I cannot change, the pig-headedness to try to change what I can. What's the difference between serene or accommodating and spineless? It's basically a prediction. What's the difference between courage and pig-headedness? It's basically a prediction about whether you think it'll turn out good or bad. Okay, so anybody, let's see, what else we got here? If you posed a question earlier or a comment or a critique, run it again so I can see. The three parenting approaches are instructive here: authoritative and authoritarian, permissive, and authoritative. Okay, now these have had a variety of different framings over the time. I don't know the one with authoritative, but let me pull up a few examples. So one was from a pop psych in the 1970s, actually, which is there's parent, child, and adult in relationship. So authoritarian would be like parent. I don't know how these quite work. One thing I will say, though, in that framing, permissive is maybe a little like childlike. Yeah, like if you're gonna, if you meet someone as child to child, you both are permitted to do things. It's a little complicated. I may not be mapping it right. And then, of course, on top of this, there's the George Lakoff approach to this, which is authoritarian versus permissive. I don't think he has authoritative. I have noticed about Trumpists and other absolutists, or what I call hero bots, is that they will play parent or child. They'll play prudish parent or rude, precocious child, but they will never meet you adult to adult. They'll act like the parent, coaching you on how to be. They'll act like the child, oppressed by your coaching, but they won't actually meet you adult to adult. They wouldn't want to do that. They don't want to give you that credibility. Either you're the bad parent or the bad child. So these are people who will, in one breath, scold you for not living up to morality, and in the same breath, laugh at you for caring about morality. So there's that version of it. Now, the Lakoff thing is interesting. I've had one-on-one dinner with him and his wife, and it was like four of us around the table, and he was fascinating to me. So I've admired his work. George, I don't know if you know George Lakoff's work, but it was fascinating because he definitely is a champion of the more liberal approach to parenting. He wrote a whole book about Republicans and Democrats as those two different styles. And yet in his own dealings with me, he was quite the authoritarian. I mean, I can't remember someone saying, no, you're wrong, with quite as much of what you could call the authoritative. I don't go with authoritative as a third option, except maybe by one interpretation or I mean, it depends on what you mean by it. To me, and this goes, to me, there are three moves in any conflict, three basic moves, an endless variety on how you play them out and how you mix and match them. But they are assert, accommodate, and take space. And this is not an impressionistic observation, nor is it the fact that almost every field of research has its equivalent to those three. Guilty, not guilty, no, win, lose, tie. In politics, it's called exit, voice, and loyalty. In biology, it's fight, flight, fear. It's actually, so while I find those patterns show up everywhere and actually think that that's a gap in the serenity prayer, it's dealing with assertion and accommodation, is not also dealing with the possibility that I've added to an expanded serenity prayer, which is grant me the obliviousness to not care, to take psychic or space, So what I'm saying is, if you and I have a conflict, there's three possible moves I could make, which is I can assert within the conflict, I can accommodate within the conflict, or I can leave the conflict. So there's a way in which that connects up to the three moves I'm suggesting in politics, which is why I don't have a problem with being dismissive. I'm trying to figure out where to be dismissive. I'm trying to figure out where to tell them to fuck off, where to not care, where to lobby, all of that sort of stuff. I'm trying to figure out that's a strategic question, not a moral question to me. I'm just trying to figure out which tool to use in dealing with this moral challenge of dealing with anybody who's an absolutist. But it's grounded actually in something deeper, which is what in the physics work I do is called Contergrade. So imagine that you've got a flow going this way and a flow going this way. Let's say water currents, okay, and they result in turbulence. That is, if you've got flows that are flowing against each other, there's turbulence. No, it's not conflict in the subjective sense. There's no selves involved. It's water molecules. It's a traffic congestion. Okay. And either one will prevail over the other, and the other will accommodate it, or there can be a kind of synergy that results from their contergrading. This is basically, it's at the heart of the work I do on explaining how selves and trying ever emerge from physical chemistry. That is, sometimes you get a higher level orthograde from a lower level contergrade. That is, conflicts can sometimes generate new ways of doing things, including, I would argue, the origins of life. Now, the conflict doesn't go away. It's not like you suddenly are living in harmony. It's actually, I think of myself as a product of internal conflicts, what we call checks and balances. And so the whole subject of how you maintain a stable checks and balance system, it applies at the level of keeping myself alive. It applies at the level of keeping the US government a checks and balance system. And the funny thing is, we don't much like checks and balances. We have another name for them. We call them paradoxes, or they're in logic, they're called paradoxes. So think about, so we had, with Dale, I got a taste of a few of these, and I mentioned one. I hate hate, which proves I don't hate, okay? That's a paradox. I would argue that every one of the popular moral principles is actually a paradox. It's not a principle. So you shouldn't be judgmental, commit to flexibility, be intolerant of intolerance, hate, they go, do not be negative. Negativity is a no-no. All of those are paradoxes, and I want them that way for the very reason that it seems to me you want to dismiss dismissiveness. Yes, I want to be on both sides of that. I want to be stuck with the human challenge of figuring out what to dismiss and what to not dismiss. So it goes further than this. Remember someone saying you're being dismissive, like it's a bad thing, and I'm dismissing that dismissiveness of the concept of dismissiveness as if dismissiveness is always bad. I'm trying to figure out where it's good and where it's bad. And there is, okay, so now I will get to Run because I think he's just said something that's useful to my argument here. So absolutism, totalitarianism, there are all these different words, and extremism, we've got a bunch of them. Totalitarianism is, so I'm gonna put my flavor on them. I'm not giving you the official definition. I'm telling you how I think about those terms. So absolutist is, so I'm gonna name all three of them and work it out about them. Okay, so absolutism is, it derives from the term which originally meant dissolved away from. Dissolved away. So to absolution would be like that. You're dissolved away from your own crimes. Absolute zero is like that. You are uninfluenceable by external temperatures. You have perfect insulation. So that's why I have found that word useful, because that's what's going on, I think, with the Trumpists. And once again, it's got nothing to do with politics or lifestyle brand or whether they wear the flag and the crosses. None of that. Absolutism would be fun because life is a vulnerability and nobody wants that. If you can get away with it, just pretend like you've solved reality and disappear into your suit of armor and become an absolutist. I also like the term absolutist just because it makes a connection across. Totalitarian is an interesting word. The definition I found most useful was that it is a society that is attempting to control not just your behavior, but your thoughts. Basically a form of memicide, that is, you're killing off memes. You are not allowed to think that thing. Now, I've come up with a different definition of it by repurposing a concept you get from a psychologist named Otto Rank. Otto Rank talked about what he called partialization, which is treating your something like everything, like it's everything. Like, because you're good at this one thing, it's the only thing that counts. And it proves that you're in charge of the world and you should be in charge of the world or whatever, okay? So partialization is treating your wee little something like it's everything, okay? And I think it's probably the wrong term for it. It's actually totalizing. To totalize is to take your little something and pretend it's a totality. Okay. Extremism is another term that gets used here. And I have to notice, because when I'm trying to define these things, I have to figure out, okay, well, what could it mean? What if it meant that, what kind of problems would arise? Okay, well, extremism often means like, whoa, that guy is way out on the edge of what should be. And so extremism is kind of subjective. That is, I am extreme just for living in California compared to someone who lives elsewhere. That is, what I'm doing looks like exaggerated, and apparently we are all kind of extremists to someone, and if we aren't extremists to someone alive, we certainly are extremists to someone long dead. You know, someone in the Middle Ages would just consider me way the fuck out there. But there's a different meaning of extremism that interests me, which is being a moron. And there I'm defining moron as someone who says, put more and more on, pile more and more on. You can never have enough salt. You can never have enough community. You can never have enough of, you know, some trait that is probably a loaded last word, load-bearing loosely defined last word. So a moron would include someone who says you can never have enough toughness. It would include someone who'd say you could never have enough love. Okay. Remember, I'm trying to straddle my way through life. I'm trying to be wary in stereo. I don't want to be too loving or too tough for the situation. I see it like driving down a winding road where there's dangers on either side. So and the road keeps changing and how far I should be to one side or another. And so that's where I think morons would be like backseat drivers who are looking out one window and not the other. And they're saying, you're way too close to the right side of the car. You got to veer all the way over, air completely on the left side, not paying any attention to the fact that there are errors on the left side too. So those would be my approaches to those words. And you'll see what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get very careful about these words. That means also getting more careless with some of them. Because when someone tells me, you shouldn't be dismissive, well, I don't want to take them at their word on that. I want to figure out where I want to be dismissive and where not to. Obviously, we are not all capable of paying attention to everything everywhere. So attentionomics is a huge issue for humans. There's way too much. Anybody who claims that they're paying attention to that mindfulness will make it so you're aware of everything, go fuck off. It's totally impossible. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. We have finite fuss budgets. We can only fuss over a few things. And so picking them carefully matters a lot. And that means that I'm ignorant of whole lots of things. And I'm dismissive of whole lots of things. Some of them are things I wish I knew more about. Some are things I'm almost proud to not know more about. Okay, boy, can I talk? Talking snakes, magic trees. Okay, there's one. Okay, either extreme is very dangerous, life-threatening, life-endangering. I have a story for you on that, sadly. Thank you, Michael. I bet most of us do, and that's kind of one of the ways to teach this approach. So in science, they talk about alpha and beta errors. They talk about false positives and false negatives. What are we talking about there? We're talking about regretted yeses and regretted nos. So on a question like, should I quit? Let's say you're in a partnership or you're in a business. It's a yes/no question, and you can have a right yes and a wrong yes, by which I mean a yes, you're glad you said, a no, you're glad you said, a yes, you're sorry you said, a no, you're sorry you said. So when I taught this stuff, I would point out, like in a psych class or something like that, I get students thinking about it. Name a time when you said, yes, I should quit, and you were glad you quit. Name a time when you said, yes, I should quit, and you're not glad you quit. The same with the no's. Think of a time you said, no, I'll stick with this, and you're glad you stuck with it. Name a time when you said, no, I should stick with this, and you regretted it. By a certain age, I think we've all experienced, to some degree or another, those major and minor errors on either side of the road, and successes and failures. So all I'm trying to do is minimize my wrong yeses and wrong nos. I don't assume that I could ever get a formula by which I'd never have any more wrong yeses and wrong nos. That is, I will still be making, I'll still have false positives and false negatives. I'm just trying to reduce them. And that's where I see the serenity prayer so useful, because the prayer is the quest for greater wisdom to notice the differences that make a difference to, for example, when you should be tough and when you should be loving, when you should be serene, when you should be courageous, if you want to use those words, when you should be spineless, when you should be pig-headed, if you want to use those words. I don't care about the words, because the words imply that there's a formula. And I'm saying there isn't a formula. I can just get better and better. I can try to get better and better at it. And chances are that no matter how good I get at figuring out how to say yes and no in the right places, I could just be walloped in the end by another surprise that's the worst one ever. Okay. All right. Michael de Sosa, Cruz, you also said this thing about metaphor and framing. His political framing is so bad, in my opinion now. I agree. And this was the thing that I found so interesting about it, is that he was not really interested in walking his talk. He and his wife were quite dictatorial at this meal. And I did ask them, and they definitely said that the liberal curiosity approach was better. I have a feeling that he's one of those public intellectuals where the confidence went to his head. As for the work on metaphor and framing, I think it's important. And I also want to suggest something from a different perspective on it. He borders on the postmodern in his approach, which is that since these metaphors are grounded in biology, for example, when I talk about winding roads or forks in the roads, he would say that's a metaphor. Okay, and then he kind of implies that it's therefore specious, that since it's just an intuitive metaphor, there is no parallel between the forks in the road in traffic and the forks in the road in your mind. And I think he's wrong about that. I mean, I wouldn't want to jump to that conclusion. It's a popular one. It goes all the way back to Immanuel Kant, who said, since I am stuck with my own physical biases and perceptual biases, I have no way of getting in touch with the real world. I don't buy it. And here's why. Whether there's a real world or not, you do certain things in whatever that is, your experience of the real world, it'll fuck you up. You'll die. Okay? So I do think that our metaphors they get loose. You have to pay attention for where they break down. It's not always darkest before the dawn. Sometimes it's darkest before death. But at the same time, we didn't pull them out our asses. They were based on a whole lot of practical trial and error experience of the world and what will fuck you up if you ignore it. So it comes down to this thing, we will debate what reality contains, but I have heard almost no debate about the container itself. Reality is the set of all ever-changing things that'll fuck you up if you ignore them, or will benefit you if you pay attention to them. That's what we mean by reality. If someone says God will, in reality, God will send you to hell if you don't obey his commandments or if you don't go to church every Sunday, I debate that. I think he's full of shit, but I don't debate the container. He's saying, look, it'll fuck you up if you don't pay attention to this. So we're in agreement about what reality is as a container, not about what it contains. Okay, let me see. I'm going to go down the list here. Where I live, there's the same thing. Looking back, always been this way. I find it very depressing. Jay, where you live, I don't know those details, but what I want to say is I would say that this is the most disappointing news of my life. It's the hardest cosmic wedgie for me to deal with in my life is I thought there were grown-ups. I thought that there were people who really had their shit together. And now I find out that people are the worst, that me included, that we were all in diapers a little while ago and we're completely freaked out by this challenging life we lead. So I find it really discouraging. I mean, I grew up in the most heady, optimistic time this world has ever known, almost. I mean, it was the coming of the age of Aquarius, and I thought we were all going to grow up and be nice and kind and respectful. And now I find out that all of us have this incredible chip on our shoulders. So, okay. So let's see. There was something I wanted to get. A question. JS, are you familiar with Hassan's work and his views? It seems pretty clear. Yeah, and probably... Yeah, so I have not met Steve Hassan. I have been a good friend of his has invited me on to his encouraged Steve Hassan to put me on a show. I have definitely read both of his books. I find him kind of pedestrian. Yes, obviously. I mean, so I am a participant in what's called the Institute for Cultic Studies. And I did a presentation with their group 2 years ago and then 3 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, 2 in a row. And I swear I was the only one in the conference who was talking about that kind of large scale cults like Trumpism. So it's not like it's a similarity. We're just talking about a size difference between the cults. Now, what is my definition of cult? To me, a cult is plural of asshole or absolutist. It's a collective assholery, like a gaggle of geese. And yes, I appreciate Steve Hassan's work early on in it. And I also think that Dale might find more resonance with Steve Hassan around the cultic studies, as he might with this other guy, the one who recommended me to Hassan, whose name is John Attack. He's British. I do a monthly conversation with him, a Zoom kind of podcast conversation with him. And he is much more inclined in Dale's direction than I am about these people. And so is Steve Hassan, and I think they're dealing with a different kind of person. So John Atak's experience is a vast success in helping to deprogram Scientologists. That's where his focus was, and that's where his claims to success are. And we've gone rounds because I'm saying, yeah, I understand. And that's you've got great formulas for dealing with those guys. I don't think the Trumpists are quite like that. They're a cult that takes it a different step than an individual who, for example, you can persuade to start getting a little curious because at least they have to figure out how to rationalize their Scientology to their parents, that kind of thing. I don't think you're going to get that issue with the Trumpists. So here I've said something that I'm going to have to think more about. I've said on the one hand, Trumpism is a cult. On the other hand, I've said that intervention with the Trumpists is different from dealing with, let's say, the cultists of Scientology. Another thing I have found in that work, in cultic studies, is a vocational hazard. Most of the people who research and write in cultic studies were once cult members. And my experience of them is that they're doing that thing that Alcoholics Anonymous does. It's very useful. It's very therapeutic. They're claiming that they were victims, or there's a tendency to claim that they were victims of a parasite, in this case, a cult leader. So they're into the concept of brainwashing, and I think there's a fair amount of that in Steve's work as well, that you are brainwashed by these people. And I am interested in something else. I have my near cultic experience. I lived for 7 years on the world's largest hippie commune. I was an elected elder there at 24, and I know what I was getting off on there, and no, I wasn't brainwashed. It wasn't exactly a cult. We were quite irreverent. We had a good ironic sense of humor. We could tease ourselves. People could leave whenever they wanted. We didn't get that dogmatic, but we were plenty smug. And I was among the smuggest. That's how I became an elected elder. I was doing what I call brain purging. They weren't laundering my brain. I wanted my brain purged of doubt and anxiety and questions about whether I was a good person or not. And so I joined it quite enthusiastically and willfully. They did not have to sell me on it at all. And I think that's the part we tend to miss when we're looking at how cults happen. The Trumpists are having a fucking field day. They're having so much fun jerking off to their own authority, their emancipation from all self-doubt. Who wouldn't like that? It was so much fun for me, and it's so much fun for them. I can relate to it. It's brain purging. It's terrible. It's a major brain fart. It could snuff out the entire world. But I have to admit, I have to own that this is something about us. We would like that kind of simple solution. And the more troubled the world gets, the more complicated this cluster flux becomes, the more we will crave a simple, authoritative answer. I see Trumpism as a early, pioneering form of something the world is in for a whole lot more of, to our deaths. I mean, I think it's probably the most likely cause of our death is people just doing that thing that they do. It's a kind of brain purging, and yeah, it's especially easy when there's someone selling you on it. And at the same time, if we don't get clear on what that appetite is for the self-flattering, self-identifying that comes from saying, I wouldn't be a manipulator. I'm not into, I'm not into any of the bad stuff. I'm only into the good stuff. If we don't get clear on that, we have no chance against these guys. We don't have any chance against it. We'll be a sucker for one of these counter cults in no time. So some of that. Okay. Yes. Okay. So Molina says, yeah, emancipation from self-doubt. Nailed it. That's what a person would want. And I'm saying, try to understand why that's true of people. It goes way back. It's because we have language, and therefore we have imaginations. We have the capacity to imagine anything, real, fantastical, whatever, good, bad, horrible, terrifying. I see us as trudging through a sandstorm of mojo eroding, confidence eroding possibilities. And we can imagine, with language, we can imagine the ideal, and we can see where we fall short, and we can self-idealize. That's what's going on with us. That's what I think would be the challenge for any intelligent life form anywhere in the universe. As we often in our sci-fi, we consider them wise or genius or something. No, they'd be as fucked up as us because they have language. They'd be visionary. They'd be delusional. I'm sure they'd have gods. Gods are the perfect solution to it. Think about it this way. The struggle for existence from the beginning of life on involves three things. You need to make four things. You need effort, just the struggle for existence. You need interpretation. That is, you need to be able to interpret your environment. Chemicals aren't interpreting their environment. They're responsive to it in a strictly physical way. So we're interpreting effort, and you're trying to do the right thing, not the wrong thing, the good thing, not the bad thing. And you're doing this to maintain your integrity. What do I mean by integrity? I mean your checks and balances. Okay, so what is God? He's the idealization of all four of those traits. That's nothing else but that. I can imagine, because I have language, I can imagine omnipotence, that is, I'm all powerful. My effort is infinite. I'm omniscient, meaning I'm all knowing. I am the perfect interpreter of reality. I am omnificent. I am all good. And there's not a great word for this, but it's I am one. I never contradict myself. I have no doubts. On the question, could God build a mountain so big he couldn't move it, which would suggest that either way, he's not omnipotent. The general theological answer is to that mystery. You can ask it about omniscience too. Could he build a puzzle so hard he can't solve it? The answer is he wouldn't. He doesn't have any kind of cognitive dissonance at all. So that we can imagine a God, and the God is just exactly what every organism would want if it had consciousness, it had language, and would be disappointed to see that they don't have. So I just want us to start to recognize that this goes way back. It's a human thing. It goes back to the beginning of gods and the idea that you could humble yourself before a Lord and then lord it over other people. It goes back that far. It's really coming to a head in our generation. I mean, the social media and this need for affirmation that is the human compensation for the anxiety of being human. Oh, it's coming to a head, but it's not new. We've been at it a long time. So our consciousness could just be a lag time between inputs and eventual outputs. Here's where the computational model breaks right down. Once you actually understand that we're struggling for our own existence. What does that mean? We take in energy that we use to channel into work to regenerate ourselves. Computers are doing nothing of the sort. They're not doing that. Yes, there are lag times. My ironic joke about me is that I've wasted my entire life learning things I now already know. So yeah, lag times. But no, that's not like, we are not computers, and computers are not like us. They are not minds. This is an important piece. I'll just touch on it because it's going to relate to the stuff that I'm doing in this new series. We are very unclear on what information means, and we like it that way. It's another one of those loose words. So you'll find plenty of scientists who will give you the big history of the universe, and they'll say there was a cosmos, and it created this, and it created that, and then it created DNA, which has information. What do we mean by information? Well, there's two main definitions of information. So one thing that Aristotle figured out and gets overlooked a lot is that there's form and there's matter, and they always have to be together. You can have the same matter can take on different forms, as you can mold clay and all of that. And the same form can be transferred from one matter to another. So for example, you could stick a rock in the ground, pull it out, pour some mud in there, the mud would take the form of the rock, just the standard template stuff. Okay, so that's one definition of information. It's just pattern transfer. And that's the one they use in physics. But that's not what we mean by information. Information is about something for someone trying to do something. Okay? So is a computer an information processor? Well, yeah, but there's nothing's information to a computer because it's not trying to do anything. It's actually no different from any other machine. It's just more detailed and fancy, but it's not conscious because it's not striving for anything. It's not struggling to do anything. The energy it gets is put into it. It doesn't have to rebuild itself because it's not falling apart. It's made of the most durable things. It's also working in binaries, absolute, unequivocal, what we call discreteness. Like numbers are all discrete. One is different from two. It's you don't, no rounding errors. You're either a 0 or a 1. Okay. So to me, we put information into a computer. It does some juggling of it, and then it's only information to us on the way out. The computer is not doing anything with it. What would you get if you populated a sterile planet with 1 million supercomputers connected up doing AI? A sterile planet. Nothing trying to stay alive on that planet. So yes, so human is computer is the current rage, and I'm arguing that minds are not computers and computers are not minds. They're different, and we have to understand the difference. I have great respect for computers. I mean, I thrive on them. Okay, let's see. I want to give up on logic. I just go to their bubbles and call them bullies now. Yes, but okay. So two things there, Julie, about that. Uh, uh, I want to give up on logic in a certain way. There's this idea that's really at the basis of all the stuff we do in computation, which is that logic solves things. Logic doesn't solve things. Logic is a grammar. It's like math. It's a grammar. It's a language, but it's not. Sorry, it's not a language, because what you pour into that grammar has all sorts of consequences for what you get to come out. So there was this idea that we hear it first in Plato, but it's got to have been around for a long time, which is if we could just crunch the facts or the evidence through logic or math, we would all come to the same conclusions. That's really what Plato and Socrates were about. Okay. And they tried for years and years, and now we know it's actually not possible for a number of reasons. But the most fundamental is what's called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Anyway, so when people talk like they've got critical thinking, which I'm seeing more and more of it these days, what does that mean? What does it mean? It matters what you put into it. Here, I'm going to give you an example, standard example from logic. All men are ducks. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is a duck. And a lot of my work in the science methodology is about how you categorize things. It's an overlooked thing. So you got the formal methods like logic and math. You've got the empirical methods like science, where you check things out against reality. But the real question is, the overlooked question is, how do you categorize something? How do you decide that Socrates is a man? Right? How do you figure that part of it out? So there's that problem. The other thing I want to say, though, about I just call them bullies, is that's not working with these guys for the same reason I mentioned earlier, which is to them being a bully is a badge of honor. The line that sticks out and stings most that Trump said in his entire time was early on. It was in the second debate with Hillary Clinton when he said, "That makes me smart." I think that they robotically say that no matter what. That is, they're not actually paying attention to the words. Now, I will ridicule them for pretending they're bullies when they're actually wimps or pussies. I'll even call them pussies. Because I have my problems with using female epithets. I don't have a problem calling someone a dick, but pussy's a little more complicated, and I'm trying to avoid that. But with them, I'll call them that. I'll call them fags. I'm trying to undermine them. I'm saying that they're not bullies. They're actually wimps. The word fascist and fag both being a bundle of sticks. Why are they a bundle of sticks? Well, they say we're stronger this way. Yeah, and you're weaker that way because you're hiding behind the crowd. You're lost in the crowd. So I will ridicule them about that because I'm looking for something they haven't heard before. I don't know if you were here for the beginning of the conversation, but I said that they're like exhibitionists. in that they sidle up knowing that they can, that when they get your attention, they can open their trench coat and show off their stiff little self-certainty. And no matter how you respond, they have a way of saying, that makes me smart. And so I have to surprise them. Calling them bullies doesn't quite do it anymore. None of the things we have done in the past work. That's why the study group is happening. We're saying, yeah, I know these are all great techniques and they have their place, but we're talking about a different kind of bully than we've seen before. And I'm trying to figure out how to disappoint and shame them. And I'm having some success with it, but how do I measure it? Well, they decide that they can't actually make any headway with me. So they slink off and go find someone else. They go find out someone else. Now, the question is how to handle the last word on that. And no, okay, so Melina raises an important thing, that they can digest my argument. No, I'm not trying to do it at the level of argument. I am trying to disappoint the vibes. And so this is why I actually think that disparaging them is a good way to go. That is, they come expecting to harvest. Some of these people were really shy before they found Trumpism. But what they did is they discovered that they could pretend they could say, that makes me smart, and walk away no matter what. Okay, so they're coming looking for an orgasm. They want a self-affirming orgasm. And so if I laugh at them, if I ridicule them, no, they're not going to hear my arguments. And I got to say, I don't know what works. Remember, my core question here is, how do you humbly humiliate someone who will say or do anything to avoid human humility? How do you humbly humiliate them? I haven't got a way. I'm experimenting. I'm trying to figure it out. I know that what we've been trying isn't working. That's why I'm trying new stuff. That's what I'm trying in these videos. But if I was saying, here's the formula for doing it, this is how you solve it with Trumpists, don't listen to me. It's way harder than that. We're talking about people who will say or do anything to avoid human humility. And part of what they're doing is to not listen. They are completely inoculated us against any kind of anything we might try to do on them. That's the point. So when people say, yeah, that won't work, I say, that's right. Remember who we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people whose sole goal is to make sure that nothing works on them. That's what makes them the absolutists they are. They are, and this is also why absolute power corrupts absolutely. Nothing can get through to it. That's what dooms them in the long run, but in the short run could doom us. Okay, so asking questions is another one, and I strongly recommend you take a look at the stuff about street epistemology. It's great, and yet I'm also looking at the downside of that one, which is I have often gotten into asking questions of them, and it does tend to play into their exhibitionism. They tend to want to answer with their talking points, with their slogans. They're not actually listening to the questions. What they're doing is jerking off to feeling like they're being interviewed, like they're a celebrity pundit. Okay, so there are challenges with that one. Okay, so let's see. We're winding down soon here. Hold on a second. Another 10 minutes. So let's see. Shady Vista, you said, is Trump their transference object? Rank talked about this. Can you give me a little bit more on that? I don't feel like it doesn't feel familiar enough to me, and it feels like it could be useful. So if you've got something, let me know. Asking question goes nowhere. See, this is the thing, and I want or somewhere I don't want to go. That's my point about it. That's my point. So, yeah, we're looking for answers to what I consider to be the make or break question for humankind, for any intelligent lifestyle. Julie, you asked an interesting question there. There is so loaded questions are once again, great things you can try on them. Um, uh, so now this one's, you ask, when has bullying become cool? I would ask it slightly differently, because I actually find I am more and more I'm frustrated by rhetorical questions. So, and my solution to it is not to ignore them, but to turn them into real questions. So, a question that I would want to sting them with, and not that it would be very effective, but a question you might want to sting them with is, can you remember the time in your life when you realized that you could relieve a lot of anxiety by just joining Trump? Or when did these are loaded questions, like, when did you stop beating your wife, to an unmarried man? Okay. Um, it assumes things, and I think that's useful. Okay, let's see. I'm still looking to see whether Shady Vista, is Trump their transfer an object? Rank talked about this. Yeah, we may not get to that question, but feel free to write me. By the way, feel free to write me about anything. Just you've got my email. I'm going to put it. It's kind of straightforward. js@jeremysherman.com. Yeah. So a few things here. Write me. Email me if you want to join that study group where we're dealing with this question: how do you humbly humiliate people who will say or do anything to avoid human humility? Really hard question, make or break question. Let's see, and email me also if you'd like a free half-hour session where we work on something in your private life, like dealing with some tough judgment call or some absolutist in your private life. I've got clients who come to me for that. I charge $300 an hour after the first half hour. I'm very flexible about my schedule. People get in touch when they want. And let's see. Yes, okay. Yes, in a way. So Shady Vista did get back to me. Yeah, Becker's work is really important to me. That you could say that's a grounding for the stuff I was doing about what anxious creatures we are. I was once brought in as a keynote speaker at the Ernest Becker conference. Why? Because of the origins of life work. Because they saw in our work on the origins of life and the origins of language that they had the grounding they needed for denial of death. I have expanded it because I think that every little setback is a little bit like death. And yes, what Becker is talking about is that we are the first creature that can foresee in detail our own deaths. And so we're dealing with a question that I would frame as, the underlying question for all religion, spirituality, and the like, which is, how do you throw all into life knowing you're going to be thrown out? Dog doesn't necessarily probably know that they're going to be thrown out. I mean, they might have some notion, but it's nothing like ours. Okay, so Becker's argument is that we tend to come up with what he called immortality projects. And the further research into Becker's hypothesis, what's called terror management theory, it's a whole branch of psychological empirical research, led by a guy named Sheldon Solomon. It suggests that people dig in their heels on their values when you prime them on their deaths. If you point out that, hey, you're going to die, they tend to dig into what Becker calls an immortality project, which is, I'll die, but this will live on. This which I stand for. This is where the loaded, load-bearing, loose language becomes our last words. I hadn't noticed this before right now, but it's actually last words before death. I'm reading a book right now about the varieties of ways that Nazis dealt with the aftermath of it. And a lot of it's about what they said as they were going to the gallows. And most of them stuck with their immortality project. That is, I was doing this for God and country. I was doing this for the Führer. They're very proud of it. So I am dying, but my beliefs will live on. That they are my immortality project. And so, yes, it's interesting to me how little the Trumpists pay attention to Trump's mortality. And I do think that by now, yes, of course, it would be their transference to an immortality project. Whatever happens to me, I am MAGA now. I have subsumed myself within that. And that's that fascist thing. That is, I no longer exist. That's how you become an empty suit of armor. Is that I'm not here. I am a vessel for something greater than me that makes me great. So yeah, okay. Yes, and yeah. So in a way, terror management is what religion is referred to. I have pointed out that there are three ways of dealing with that question: how to throw all in, knowing that you'll have to be thrown out. Two of them get a lot more attention than the third, and it's a nice one to get closed on. And to close on, the first one is so it's basically, how do I invest knowing I have to divest from life? And one answer is invest in the one true immortality project that will grant you eternal life. So you get that from the religious people. The second approach is divest, become unattached, don't care about anything. You're not really a self anyway. You get that from Buddhism, from some versions of existentialism, postmodernism, all that sort of stuff. Mine is, yeah, that's the question. The third way is what I call being a soul nerd, which is, yeah, that's the question. I don't have any sacred texts that tell me to invest in the one true thing or to divest from everything the way that a Buddhist text might. No, I'm trying to figure out what to invest in and what to divest in, knowing that I twitch a little whenever I have to divest of something, because it reminds me of my own death. So for me, everything becomes sacred text. At that point, there's no experience I have, including the losses and all that isn't the curriculum of dealing with the fact that I was born this creature that can foresee his own death and therefore is burdened by this question, how to throw all in knowing I'll have to be thrown out. It doesn't make my pain any less painful, but it gives me some context for it. And what am I talking about? When I quit something too soon or when I quit something too late? I have these 1,000 articles I wrote for Psychology Today under the name Ambigamy, and ambigamy is it's depressing, dude. In most, I'm glad you smiled afterwards. Yes, it is deeply depressing in most delightful way. So ambigamy started out. A woman criticized me for being like this in a partnership. It's like I was going to take some, but not all of her, and I was going to give some and not all of me. And ambigamy came to me as a term when I realized, no, actually, that's exactly how I am and how we all are. We can't be inclusive of everything. We have to quit some stuff, all of that sort of stuff. So I did come up with a limerick for it that deals with it in relationship, in partnership. So I will end on this. So it's called Ambigamy. In this pairing, I find that I'm fearing about when we'll start breaking and tearing. Oh, don't you, dear, leave me. Too soon it would grieve me, or too late when you start to get wearing. So what to leave, what to hold on to, all of that sort of stuff. In this pairing, I find that I'm fearing about when we'll start breaking and tearing. Oh, don't you, dear, leave me. Too soon it would grieve me, or too late if you start to get wearing. This is a perfect note to end on because I've gone an hour and a half. Get in touch with me. It's been a pleasure being with you today. Thank you for being here. What fun for me. And it's even more fun when we can actually talk to each other's face to face. So get in touch with me if you want. Oh, by the way, one last thing. Jay says that Trump is Biff Tannen. I hope you know that Biff Tannen was actually the character in Back to the Future was built on Trump. That he was who they had in mind. All right, goodbye, you loves. I'll see you soon. Take care. Get in touch. I'm around. All right. Thank you.